The hunt begins. Who is the real monster? The jungle was too quiet. Captain Ryan moved carefully, his boots sinking slightly into the damp, alien soil. The thick trees around him twisted in strange shapes, their dark blue leaves rustling with a wind he couldn't feel. The sky above was barely visible through the heavy canopy, and the air smelled of something rotten, something old. His grip tightened on his rifle. His orders were clear. Find the creature. Kill it. They called it a monster. A deadly beast. It had attacked 3 human convoys in the past month. Bodies were found torn apart, blood soaking the ground. No survivors, no mercy. Ryan had seen the pictures before leaving the base. He had seen the fear in the eyes of the men who spoke of this creature, this thing that haunted the jungle. But he wasn't afraid. He had faced monsters before. The jungle grew darker as he moved deeper inside. His visor's night vision cast everything in a cold green hue. Every few steps, he paused, listening. Nothing. No birds. No insects. No movement. Too quiet. Ryan had spent years on alien planets. He knew how dangerous silence could be. His heart pounded steadily in his chest. His breathing was slow, controlled. He was a soldier, trained for this. He had hunted before. He would hunt again. Then he heard it. A low growl. Deep. Guttural. Close. He froze, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. His body tensed. The sound came from his left, somewhere behind the thick trees. He turned slowly, carefully. His rifle's scope scanned the area, searching for movement. Nothing. And then, a blur. Something big moved between the trees. Fast, almost too fast. Ryan's eyes narrowed. He adjusted his stance, raising his rifle higher. His heartbeat quickened. There. A shadow shifted near the base of a large tree. A pair of glowing blue eyes stared at him from the darkness. The monster. Ryan didn't hesitate. He aimed, finger pressing against the trigger. But the creature moved. A flash of gray skin. Long limbs. A towering form. It wasn't running toward him. It was backing away. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. That wasn't right. The reports said the creature was a hunter. A killer. A mindless beast that attacked without warning. But this thing was afraid. Ryan hesitated for only a second too long. The creature turned and ran. Ryan cursed and sprinted after it. The jungle became a blur around him. Vines and low branches slapped against his armor, but he pushed forward. His boots crushed fallen leaves and twigs as he chased the fleeing creature. It was fast, faster than any human, but Ryan was well trained, his endurance unmatched. Through the trees, he caught glimpses of it. Long limbs, smooth dark skin, a lean, muscular frame. Not a beast, a being. He didn't know why, but the thought sent a chill down his spine. Still, he chased it, because that was his mission, because that was his duty, because he had no choice. The creature suddenly stumbled. It tripped over something. Roots, rocks, or maybe it was just exhausted. Its large body crashed against the jungle floor, sending up a cloud of dust. Ryan skidded to a stop, raising his rifle again. The creature struggled to rise. Its breathing was heavy, labored. A large cut bled from its side, probably from a sharp branch. Ryan stepped closer, finger tight on the trigger. "Stay down," he ordered, his voice steady. "Don't move." The creature flinched. And then, it spoke. A voice. Deep, rough, but full of fear. "Please, don't hurt me." Ryan's blood ran cold. He stood frozen, staring at the creature lying before him. That wasn't possible. Creatures didn't talk. Beasts didn't plead for their lives. Yet, this one had. The words had been clear. Desperate. This wasn't a monster. It was something else. Something no one had told him about. Ryan swallowed hard, his hand suddenly sweaty against the metal of his rifle. For the first time since stepping into this jungle, he wasn't sure if he was the hunter or the hunted. A monster with a heart. The wind howled through the dense alien jungle, rustling the twisted blue leaves above. The night was thick, pressing down on Captain Ryan like an unseen weight. His rifle was steady, aimed directly at the creature lying in the dirt before him. His breath was slow, controlled, his heartbeat steady from years of training. Yet, something was different. He had hunted beasts before, killed threats before, but never had a monster spoken to him. "Please, don't hurt me." The words echoed in his head. They shouldn't exist. Beasts didn't plead. Creatures didn't beg. And yet here it was. Ryan took a step closer, his boots crunching against the damp jungle floor. The creature flinched, curling in on itself, as if expecting a strike. It was tall. Even in its weakened state, he could tell it would stand at least 7 feet. Its skin was smooth and dark, almost metallic under the faint glow of Ryan's visor light. Large, glowing blue eyes stared at him, not with anger, not with hunger, but with fear. Ryan had seen that look before, on the battlefield. In the eyes of young recruits, moments before their first real fight. Not in the eyes of a monster. His grip tightened on his rifle. His mind screamed at him to pull the trigger, to finish the mission. But something inside him refused. Whoa! He stopped, realizing his throat was dry. He swallowed and tried again. "What are you?" The creature shuddered, clutching its bleeding side. When it finally spoke, its voice was hoarse, strained. "Zurek. My name is Zurek." A name. Ryan wasn't expecting that. He had called it creature in his head. Monster. Target. But it had a name. Ryan exhaled sharply. His training, his instincts, all told him that this thing was the enemy. And yet there was something very, very wrong here. "You killed those people," Ryan stated, his voice cold. "3 convoys. No survivors." Zurek flinched again, but shook his head violently. "No, not me." "Lies," Ryan snapped. "We found bodies. Ripped apart. What else could have done that?" The alien hesitated, then looked away. Ryan frowned. That reaction, it wasn't anger. It wasn't defiance. It was shame. Zurek knew something. Ryan's finger twitched near the trigger, his instincts screaming to press for the truth. "Talk. Now." For a long moment, Zurek said nothing. Then, in a low, pained voice, he whispered, "You think you are hunting a monster, but I was the one being hunted." The words made Ryan's blood run cold. Hunted. That wasn't what the reports said. The military briefings had shown a violent alien attacking humans, an uncontrollable threat. But now, looking at the bleeding, terrified being before him, Ryan found himself questioning everything. "You're lying," Ryan said, but there was no confidence in his voice now. Zurek slowly pushed himself up, wincing. "Your people came first," he murmured. "They took our land, forced us from our homes. When we resisted, they called us monsters." Ryan's jaw tightened. He had heard these stories before, on other planets, in other wars. Colonization, expansion, the endless need for more resources. But this was different, because he had been sent here to kill without question. A branch cracked in the distance. Ryan snapped his rifle up instantly, scanning the trees. His visor flickered with motion sensors. Something big was moving, but not towards him. Towards them. Zurek's breathing quickened. His large eyes darted towards the shadows. Fear crept into his voice. "They found me." Ryan barely had a second to process the words before a low, inhuman growl echoed through the jungle. Not from Zurek. From something else. A cold chill ran down Ryan's spine. A second pair of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness. Then another. And another. Ryan's gut twisted. He had been briefed about only one creature. But now, 3 sets of glowing eyes burned through the night. The air felt thicker, charged with unseen tension. Ryan took a slow step back, rifle trained on the approaching figures. Zurek, still weak, struggled to rise beside him. "They are not like me," Zurek whispered. His voice trembled. "They do not ask for mercy." Ryan didn't need an explanation. His instincts were already screaming. These were the real monsters. And they were coming. The jungle around them seemed to tighten, the shadows moving unnaturally. The three creatures stepped closer, their forms now visible under Ryan's visor light. They were taller, leaner, and more twisted than Zurek. Their skin was cracked and dry, their jaws lined with sharp, serrated teeth. Predators. Hunters. Ryan had spent his whole life fighting nightmares. But even he had to admit, these things were something else. He had to act. His rifle locked onto the nearest one, but before he could fire, the lead creature let out a deafening shriek. And then, it lunged. The truth behind the lies. The jungle was alive with chaos. Ryan's heartbeat roared in his ears as he rolled to the side, barely dodging the razor-sharp claws of the lunging beast. The creature's shriek sent a chill down his spine, high-pitched, unnatural, filled with rage and hunger. His rifle snapped up. His instincts took over. Bang! A direct hit. The force of the plasma round sent the beast stumbling backward, its chest smoldering where the shot landed. But it didn't go down. Instead, it turned its glowing, hate-filled eyes toward him, baring its serrated teeth in a slow, wicked grin. Ryan's stomach dropped. "That should have killed it," he muttered under his breath. Behind him, Zurek groaned, struggling to stand. The alien was weak, injured, and completely vulnerable. Ryan had a choice: run or fight. His orders had been clear: eliminate the threat. But now, standing between Zurek and these monsters, Ryan realized he didn't know who the real enemy was anymore. The second creature lunged. Ryan barely had time to react before a powerful claw slammed into his chest, sending him flying backward. He crashed against a thick tree trunk, his armor taking most of the impact. But the air was still knocked from his lungs. Dirt and leaves rained down around him. His rifle had been torn from his hands, lying just out of reach. The creatures didn't waste time. The first one, the leader, let out a guttural growl, and the other two spread out, circling him like wolves closing in on prey. Ryan's mind raced. His knife, his sidearm, his training. None of it would matter if these things got to him first. And then Zurek moved. With a desperate snarl, Zurek lunged at the closest beast, his movement sluggish from blood loss, but still powerful. The two creatures collided with a force that shook the ground. Zurek's strength was impressive. He slammed the monster into a tree, claws digging deep into its flesh. For a moment, Ryan thought he might win. Then he saw the third one rushing toward Zurek's blind spot. Ryan didn't think. He acted. In one swift motion, he grabbed his combat knife from his belt and threw it. The blade whistled through the air and buried itself deep into the creature's exposed neck. It let out a choked screech, stumbling, clawing at its throat. Zurek used the distraction. With one final burst of energy, he twisted the head of the beast he was wrestling with and snapped its neck. The jungle fell eerily silent. The remaining creature let out an angry, unnatural screech and flowed into the shadows. Ryan stayed on guard, breathing hard, waiting for another attack. But none came. They were alone again. For now. Zurek collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. Ryan took a shaky breath, scanning their surroundings. The jungle was still, watching. He could still feel the presence of something unseen lurking beyond the trees. It wasn't over. He turned to Zurek, who was bleeding badly from his wounds. The alien's blue eyes met Ryan's, full of exhaustion and gratitude. "You saved me," Zurek rasped. Ryan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his damp hair. "Yeah, well, you jumped in first," he muttered. Silence stretched between them for a moment. Then Ryan spoke the question that had been gnawing at him since the moment the creatures attacked. Those things, what the hell were they? Zyrek's face darkened. They are what your people call monsters, he said bitterly. They came when your soldiers arrived. We do not know where they came from, only that they followed in your footsteps. Ryan frowned. You mean, we brought them here? Zyrek let out a humorless laugh. No, but you woke them up. Ryan clenched his jaw. Nothing about this mission made sense anymore. He had been told that Zyrek's species was the threat, that they were attacking humans, making this planet dangerous. But if those creatures were the real killers, why was Zyrek being hunted? You need to tell me the truth, Ryan said, kneeling beside the injured alien. His voice was steady, but his mind was storming with doubt. What's really going on here? Zyrek hesitated. Then, in a low, tired voice, he spoke. My people lived on this world for centuries. It was ours. It was peaceful. His hands curled into fists. Then your kind came. They wanted our land, our resources, and when we refused to give them what they wanted, Ryan felt a sinking feeling in his chest. They started calling us monsters, Zyrek finished quietly. Ryan didn't move, didn't speak, because deep down, he knew this story. He had seen it happen before. It had happened on Earth. It had happened to countless alien civilizations across the stars. And now, it was happening again. But this time, he was on the wrong side of it. His earpiece suddenly crackled to life. Ryan, report. His commander's voice cut through the silence. Ryan hesitated. He could still follow orders, say that he had completed the mission, that Zyrek was dead. Or, he could tell the truth and become a traitor to his own people. Ryan took a deep breath. Then he pressed the comm and made his choice. Betrayed by my own people. Ryan's fingers hovered over his earpiece. His commander's voice crackled in his ear again, sharp and impatient. Ryan, report. Did you eliminate the target? He could feel Zyrek's gaze on him. Wounded, exhausted, yet still watching. Still waiting. Waiting to see what kind of man Ryan really was. Ryan clenched his jaw. The truth was heavy in his chest, pressing down like a weight he couldn't shake. He had spent years following orders. Years believing in his mission, in his people, in the war they fought. But now he wasn't sure if he was the hero or the villain. Taking a slow breath, he made his choice. Target neutralized. Ryan lied, his voice steady. Mission complete. A long silence. Then the commander spoke. Good. Return to base immediately. The comm went dead. Ryan exhaled, his hands shaking. He had just committed treason. Zyrek was staring at him, his glowing blue eyes unreadable. You didn't tell them about me, the alien said quietly. Ryan let out a humorless laugh. Yeah, well, I figured I owed you that much. Zyrek studied him, then nodded slowly. Then we are both fugitives now. Ryan stiffened. That was the truth, wasn't it? He had just lied to his superior officer, lied to the entire mission, lied to the system he had sworn to serve. He wasn't going back to base. Not as a soldier, at least. The realization settled over him like a storm. He was alone now. Or at least, he should have been. Instead, he had Zyrek. Ryan knew they couldn't stay here. The jungle was dangerous. More of those creatures could be lurking. The humans might already be tracking him, watching, waiting for a mistake. He needed answers. And he needed a plan. Come on, he said, slinging his rifle back over his shoulder. We need to move. Zyrek hesitated. Where? Somewhere safe. Zyrek let out a dry laugh. Safe. You are hunted by your own people now. There is no safety. Ryan sighed. Yeah, well, I'll figure something out. But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at the edges of his mind. How long could he really survive against his own people? They moved quickly, slipping through the jungle like shadows. Ryan kept his rifle close, his senses on high alert. Every rustle in the trees made his pulse spike. Every distant sound sent a fresh wave of adrenaline through his veins. Zurek was slowing down. His wounds were deep, his breathing labored. Ryan cursed under his breath. They needed shelter. Fast. Then, through the dense trees, he spotted something. An abandoned outpost. It was old, covered in vines and rust, but still standing. Ryan motioned for Zurek to stay low as they approached. The entrance was barely holding together, but inside, the outpost was mostly intact. A few broken terminals, a rusted weapon rack, and an old medkit gathering dust on the shelf. Ryan grabbed the medkit immediately. "Sit," he ordered. "You're bleeding too much." Zurek didn't argue. He sank down against the wall, his chest rising and falling unevenly. Ryan popped the medkit open, pulling out a syringe filled with biofoam. "This is going to hurt," he warned. Zurek didn't flinch as Ryan injected the foam into his wounds. The alien simply let out a slow exhale, his eyes fluttering shut for a moment. "You've done this before," Ryan noted. Zurek gave him a tired smirk. "Many times." Ryan shook his head. "You said humans attacked your people, that we took your land. How long has this been going on?" Zurek's expression darkened. "Since the moment your kind arrived." Ryan swallowed hard. How had he never heard about this? The silence between them stretched. Then, Ryan's calm crackled again. "All units be advised. Captain Ryan has gone rogue." His blood turned to ice. "He is armed and dangerous. Lethal force is authorized." Zurek tensed. "They know." Ryan's mind raced. He had expected a reaction, expected his commander to be suspicious. But this? They weren't just calling him in for questioning. They had already marked him as an enemy. Ryan's fists clenched. They didn't even ask why. Didn't ask for an explanation. They just decided. Just like they had with Zurek's people. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He was prey. The realization burned through him like fire. Ryan looked at Zurek. "We need to go. Now." Zurek nodded, forcing himself to his feet. But before they could move, an explosion shook the ground. Dust and debris rained from the ceiling. Ryan ducked instinctively, his hand flying to his weapon. Through the cracked walls of the outpost, he saw them. Soldiers. His former allies. Marching toward the outpost with rifles raised. His comm unit buzzed one final time. "Ryan, surrender now. This is your last warning." Ryan met Zurek's gaze. They both knew what was coming next. They had two choices: surrender and die, or fight back. Ryan's grip tightened on his rifle. "You ready?" he asked. Zurek bared his teeth in a fierce grin. "Always." The first shot rang out, and the war truly began. Running for survival. The first gunshot split the air like a thunderclap. Ryan barely had time to shove Zurek aside before a hail of bullets ripped through the wall behind them, sending splinters and debris flying. The jungle outside lit up with red targeting lasers, crisscrossing through the dust-filled air. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to kill. Ryan gritted his teeth, his instincts taking over. He grabbed Zurek's arm and yanked him toward the back of the outpost. "Move. Now." Zurek didn't argue. They sprinted through the crumbling structure as more gunfire shattered glass, tore through metal, and sent sparks flying. The soldiers were closing in. Ryan had once trained alongside them, ate with them, bled with them. Now, they were hunting him. No way out. Ryan skidded to a stop at the back entrance, only to find it blocked. A rusted security door, half collapsed, sealed off their escape route. "Damn it," he cursed under his breath. Zurek, still panting from his injuries, looked at him. "Other way." "No time," Ryan snapped. "We need to make one." He slammed his shoulder against the door. It didn't budge. Bullets whizzed past their heads. Dust and smoke clouded the room as boots thundered through the entrance. Then, A voice crackled over the soldiers' comms. "Commander says no prisoners. Finish it." Ryan's blood ran cold. They weren't just going to kill him. They were going to kill Zurek, and Ryan had brought them straight to him. He had seconds to decide. He turned to Zurek. "Get behind me." Zurek frowned but obeyed. Ryan dropped to one knee, raised his rifle, and waited. 1 second. 2. The first soldier stepped into the open. Ryan fired. A direct hit. Center mass. The soldier crumpled, his weapon clattering to the floor. Another stepped forward, shouting into his comm. Ryan took him down too. But there were more. Too many. Zurek suddenly grabbed Ryan's arm. "Forget the door," he growled. "Hold on to me." Ryan didn't have time to ask why. Zurek's grip tightened. His body tensed. Then, a blinding flash. The world vanished. The fall. Ryan's stomach dropped. For a split second, it felt like they were falling through nothing. His ears rang from the pressure shift. His vision blurred. And then, they slammed into the ground. Ryan rolled instinctively, gun still raised, heart pounding. They were no longer in the outpost. They were outside, deep in the jungle. Zurek collapsed beside him, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Ryan blinked. What the hell just happened? Zurek coughed, wiping sweat from his brow. "I jumped." "You?" Ryan's brain struggled to catch up. He looked around. They were miles away from the outpost. He could barely see the distant smoke rising from it. "You teleported us?" Ryan asked, eyes narrowing. Zurek shook his head. "Not exactly. More like a phase shift. It takes a lot of energy. I can't do it often." Ryan ran a hand through his hair, still trying to process what had just happened. Then his radio buzzed. "We lost visual on Ryan. Searched the perimeter. He's still out there." They weren't safe. Not yet. Nowhere to run. Zurek groaned, his body trembling. "I need a moment." Ryan cursed under his breath. He could hear distant voices. The soldiers were spreading out, searching the jungle. They had minutes. Maybe less. Ryan grabbed Zurek by the arm. "Come on. We keep moving." Zurek groaned but pushed himself up. Where to? Ryan thought fast. There was only one option. The caves. Zyrek's expression darkened. "You don't want to go there." "I don't have a choice," Ryan shot back. "Unless you have another way of making us disappear." Zurek didn't respond. That was answer enough. Ryan led the way into the jungle, weaving through thick foliage. The ground was uneven, the humidity thick, the scent of something rotting hanging in the air. Minutes passed. Then, a distant shout. "Tracks over here." Ryan froze. They had been found. "Go," Ryan hissed. "Now." Zurek didn't argue. They ran. The caves of the forgotten. The jungle eventually opened up to a rocky cliffside. Below it, a dark, yawning cave entrance. Zurek slowed. "This is a mistake." Ryan wasn't in the mood to argue. "It's cover." Zurek hesitated, then followed him inside. The moment they stepped into the darkness, the temperature dropped. The cave smelled of damp stone and something else. Something old. Something wrong. Ryan flicked on his visor's night vision. The cave stretched deep, twisting downward like a wound in the earth. And then, he saw them. Bones. Piles of them. Not human. Not Zyrek's people. Something else. "Ryan," Zurek whispered. Ryan turned. And froze. Because deep in the cave, something moved. A shadow, shifting unnaturally, watching them. Ryan's rifle came up instantly. "What the hell is that?" he muttered. Zyrek's voice was barely above a breath. "The things that came before you." And then, the darkness attacked. The final stand. The darkness moved. Ryan's finger tightened on the trigger. His visor's night vision outlined the shifting shapes ahead. twisted, elongated bodies crawling low across the cavern floor. Not human. Not like Zarek. Something older. Something wrong. Behind him, Zarek took a shaky step back. His breathing was uneven, his energy drained. "We shouldn't be here," he whispered. Ryan didn't look away from the creatures. "You think?" A deep, wet clicking sound echoed through the cave. It wasn't speech, not like Zarek's. It was something more primal, more alien. A warning. Then they rushed forward. Ryan fired. The fight in the dark. The first shot lit up the cave with a burst of blue plasma. The lead creature shrieked as the round tore through its chest, its body convulsing before collapsing into the dirt. But the others didn't stop. They swarmed. Ryan moved on instinct, spinning, firing, dropping one after another. The cave flashed with each blast, revealing glimpses of clawed limbs and jagged teeth. One lunged. Ryan ducked just in time, feeling the rush of air as a talon sliced past his head. Zarek stumbled back, raising one shaking hand. The air around him shimmered. A force pulse slammed into the creatures, sending several of them flying backward. But more kept coming. Ryan pulled a grenade from his belt, yanked the pin, and tossed it forward. Boom! The explosion ripped through the cavern, sending rock and alien bodies flying. The shrieking stopped. The cave was silent. For now, Ryan's breathing was ragged. He looked at Zarek, who was barely staying on his feet. "You all right?" Ryan asked. Zarek just shook his head. Ryan sighed. They needed to move. Secrets beneath the planet. The cavern stretched deeper. The air was stale, heavy. Ryan switched his visor to infrared. The deeper they went, the more disturbing the cave became. The walls. They weren't just stone. They were covered in carvings. Ancient, alien symbols. Faint outlines of figures. Creatures, humanoid and otherwise. And at the center of the largest carving, a planet. Ryan stepped closer. His pulse quickened. "This," he muttered, running his fingers over the markings. "This is a map." Zarek's breathing hitched. "It's a warning," he whispered. Ryan turned. "Warning for what?" Zarek's glowing blue eyes flickered in the dim light. "For what your people woke up." A cold chill ran down Ryan's spine. Before he could speak, the ground trembled. "Hunted again." Ryan's comm buzzed. "Target located. Converging on your position." His stomach dropped. The soldiers. They had tracked him here. They were coming. Ryan grabbed Zarek's arm. "We have to move. Now." Zarek hesitated. "If we go up, we run into your people. If we stay, we face what lives down here." Ryan gritted his teeth. Two choices. Neither good, but only one of them kept Zarek alive. Ryan made his decision. "We go up," he said, "but we're not surrendering." Zarek looked at him, searching for any hint of doubt. He didn't find any. Together, they ran. The final stand. The moment they emerged from the caves, spotlights blinded them. Ryan's instincts screamed at him to dive for cover, but there was nowhere to go. Gunships hovered overhead, their cannons locked onto him. A full squad of soldiers stood in a half-circle, weapons raised. At the center of them, Commander Briggs, Ryan's former superior, the man who had given him this mission. His voice was cold as steel. "Captain Ryan." He called out, "Drop your weapon and surrender. You are now classified as an enemy combatant." Ryan lifted his rifle, but he didn't lower it. "How long?" he demanded. Briggs tilted his head. "How long what?" Ryan's voice was sharp. "How long have you been lying to us?" Briggs didn't flinch. "Long enough." Ryan's jaw clenched. Those creatures in the caves, the things attacking this planet. You knew about them. You covered it up. Briggs sighed. "This is bigger than you, Ryan. Bigger than one soldier's morality." Ryan shook his head. "You murdered Zarek's people. You started a war to cover your tracks. Briggs smirked. That war was necessary. Do you think the higher-ups would let an advanced alien civilization control this world's resources? We had to break them before they became a threat. Ryan's stomach churned with disgust. You killed innocent people. Briggs didn't deny it. And you killed our men when you chose to side with the enemy. Ryan's grip on his rifle tightened. Last chance, Ryan, Briggs said. Surrender, or we'll end this here. Ryan exhaled. He looked at Zurek. Zurek gave him a small nod. The choice was made. Ryan raised his rifle. Not today. Briggs' eyes flashed with disappointment. Fire. The world exploded into chaos. The battle begins. Gunfire erupted. Ryan dove for cover, returning fire with deadly precision. Soldiers dropped, but there were too many. Zurek lashed out with a force wave, sending a group of them flying. A missile streaked through the air, slamming into the ground near them. Boom! The explosion sent Ryan and Zurek sprawling. Ryan's ears rang. His vision blurred. His rifle was gone. Briggs stepped forward, weapon in hand. It didn't have to end this way, he said. Ryan spat blood and glared up at him. You were never going to let me walk away. Briggs nodded. No, I wasn't. He raised his gun. Zurek growled, struggling to his feet. You'll have to kill me too. Briggs sighed. Fine. He pulled the trigger. And then a new voice cut through the air. Stand down. Everyone froze. A new ship descended, its engines roaring. It bore the insignia of the Galactic Council. Briggs paled. Ryan smirked through the pain. Looks like the higher-ups finally noticed. The gunfire stopped, and everything changed. The price of freedom. The battlefield froze in time. Smoke still curled from the scorched earth. The wreckage of combat scattered across the jungle clearing. Bodies lay motionless, weapons still clenched in dead hands. Above them, the Galactic Council's warship loomed like a silent judge. Ryan's fingers curled into fists. His breath was ragged, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. Zurek stood beside him, tense, wounded, but alive. And in front of them, Commander Briggs lowered his weapon, his face pale. The war had changed in an instant, because the Council was here, and everyone was watching. Justice or betrayal. A voice crackled over the comms, sharp and commanding. Lay down your arms. This conflict is over. Ryan's chest heaved. He felt the weight of everything crashing down on him. The battles, the betrayals, the truth he had uncovered. And yet, despite everything, he knew this wasn't over. Not yet. From the warship, a small shuttle descended, touching down with a controlled hiss of steam. The hatch opened. Two figures emerged, their steps measured and unshaken by the battlefield's destruction. The first was a tall, blue-skinned counselor, draped in ceremonial robes, her piercing silver eyes scanning the field with unreadable precision. The second was a human admiral, his uniform pristine, his face carved from stone. Ryan recognized him instantly. Admiral Holt, his former superior, the man who had sent him on this mission, the man who had lied to him. The trial begins. Captain Ryan. Admiral Holt spoke, his voice cold and measured. You stand accused of treason, conspiracy, and the murder of your own squad mates. Ryan let out a breathless laugh. You have some nerve calling this treason. Holt ignored him, turning his gaze to Briggs. And you, Commander, stand accused of war crimes against an intelligent species. Briggs flinched. The Council had seen everything, the corruption, the lies, the cover-up. This wasn't just an internal military issue anymore. It was a galactic crisis. The blue-skinned counselor spoke next, her voice clear and sharp. The Council has reviewed the evidence, she said, including the live feed transmission Captain Ryan sent to us before this battle began. Briggs' eyes snapped to Ryan, pure hatred burning behind them. Ryan met his glare with a cold smirk. You really should have destroyed the outpost before I found it. Briggs clenched his fists, but he didn't speak. Because now, it wasn't just about power. It was about truth. And the truth had already spread. The weight of a choice. Admiral Holt folded his hands behind his back. The Council's decision is final. He looked between them. Commander Briggs, you are hereby stripped of your rank and taken into custody for war crimes against a protected species. Briggs staggered back, his face contorting in rage. This is a mistake. Soldiers, not human, but Council enforcers, stepped forward, seizing him. Briggs thrashed. You're betraying your own people, he shouted at Holt. You're giving in to aliens. Holt's face remained blank. I am upholding the law. Briggs roared in frustration as they dragged him toward the Council's shuttle. Ryan exhaled, feeling the tension in his chest loosen, just slightly. But then, Holt's gaze turned back to him. And what about you, Captain? The Admiral asked. Ryan straightened, keeping his face unreadable. You abandoned your mission, Holt continued. You disobeyed direct orders, lied to your superiors, and you killed human soldiers. Ryan didn't flinch, to save innocent lives. Perhaps, Holt allowed, but that's not how command sees it. Ryan already knew what was coming. The Council had saved him from Briggs. But that didn't mean they would let him walk free. You have two choices, Holt said. You can return with us. Stand trial. Hope that your truth is enough to save you. Ryan tilted his head. And the second option. Holt's eyes narrowed. You disappear. Silence fell over the clearing. Zurek stiffened beside him. Ryan's mind raced. Go back. Stand trial. Be used as an example, or worse, executed quietly to keep the system intact. Or vanish into the stars, never returning to the life he once knew. Both options had consequences, but only one allowed him to keep fighting for what was right. Ryan glanced at Zurek. The alien met his gaze and nodded once. The answer was clear. Ryan turned back to Holt, a slow smirk creeping onto his face. Tell command, he said, that Captain Ryan died on this battlefield. The fugitive and the rebel. Minutes later, Ryan and Zurek stood at the edge of the jungle, watching as the Council's ships lifted into the sky. Briggs was gone. The war was over, at least, on paper. But Ryan knew better. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. You sure about this? Zurek asked, his voice laced with exhaustion. Ryan adjusted the rifle on his back. Not even a little. Zurek let out a dry chuckle. And yet here we are. Ryan sighed. Yeah, here we are. The two of them stood in silence for a long moment. Then Zurek turned, his gaze shifting to the horizon. There's a smuggler's ship in the next valley, he said. If we move now, we can be off-world before they realize you're missing. Ryan exhaled, casting one last glance at the wreckage behind them. He had spent his whole life fighting for a cause he thought was just. Now he was fighting for the truth. For something bigger. Something real. Ryan squared his shoulders, stepping forward. Then let's get the hell out of here. The war is never over. As the ship left the planet's atmosphere, Ryan watched the world shrink behind him. He was a fugitive now. Hunted. But not alone. Beside him, Zurek sat in the co-pilot's seat, adjusting the ship's course. Ryan leaned back, staring at the stars ahead. Where to? Zurek asked. Ryan smirked. Anywhere the truth needs to be told. The ship's engines flared, and they vanished into the void. The fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But for the first time in his life, Ryan knew exactly what he was fighting for, and he wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not ever. The end. For now.